The following is a conversation with Johnny Vedmore from Whitney Webb's Unlimited Hangout. Now, I'm going to be completely straightforward and upfront with all you folks. We have, since last Sunday, been trying to sort of push the limits, if you will, on the public side of things pertaining to revealing and disseminating more about, I guess you could say, the upper echelons and layers of, I guess you could say, human society and otherwise. Now, the reason I bring this up is because I'm not trying to seem like a grifter or a salesman or anything like this, but with the utmost respect and kindness, I ask very politely for those that are able to do so to please have a look at patreon.com/Generation Z. Now, why do I say that? I say that because the conversation in which you are about to witness and listen to is just the surface level of what we were able to do in order to color within the lines so that we don't get this channel or video nicked. Now, on patreon.com/Generation Z, if you are impressed with videos such as these and the connections made, in addition to 6 or 7 unique series that are for the members only, we delve into way more things there, whether it's the intelligence agencies, whether it's the esoteric angle of things, or the financial aspect of things. Now, Mr. Vedmore, I can't even put into words the respect I have for Mr. Vedmore, because this is a man who I would dare to say is on a mission like few others that I've personally ever seen. And I say this because the things in which Mr. Vedmore revealed here and in the article on unlimitedhangout.com pertaining to Mr. Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, if I encourage you folks to read between the lines of what he's saying and listen closely, you may be able to make connections that even I wasn't able to catch in real time in the recording. So without further ado, again, please enjoy very kindly patreon.com/Generation Z to support, and we'll catch you all very, very soon. Thank you, everybody. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. I am extremely, I guess you could say, excited, honored, humbled to be joined today by, of course, great friend of the show, Riel, but another great friend of the show, a hustler, a journalist. I mean, the utmost respect I have for this gentleman and the work in which he delves into. From Johnny Vedmore from Unlimited Hangout. Johnny, brother, how you doing today? And thank you so very much for coming on to join us about to discuss what we're looking at here.
That's a lovely welcome. Thank you very much. I'm wearing my pink shirt, which I haven't got out of since yesterday because I've been busy doing work. And look, I got some strawberry milkshakes. I hope people don't mind me being all pink today, and maybe having a bit of strawberry milkshake around my mustache every now and again.
No problem at all, man. No problem at all. So what we're going to be looking at today is something that I really want to get the message out to everybody. This will be on for those watching on Patreon for about 24 hours, and then it'll go public right after, having to do with Klaus Schwab. Now, we spoke before we started recording about we don't believe in censorship whatsoever, but it's time to sort of color within the lines and beat these people at their own game in order for this video to stay on YouTube and all of that. So Johnny, brother, without further ado, I'm just going to share the screen of your fantastic work here from unlimitedhangout.com, Dr. Klaus Schwab, or How the C.F.R. Taught Me to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. I'm just going to read this subheading here that you wrote, and then you can take it away. So Johnny writes, the World Economic Forum was not simply the brainchild of Klaus Schwab, but was actually born out of a CIA-funded Harvard program headed by Henry Kissinger and pushed to fruition by John Kenneth Galbraith and the quote-unquote real Dr. Strangelove, Herman Kahn. This is the amazing story behind the real men who recruited Klaus Schwab, who helped him create the World Economic Forum, and who taught him to stop worrying and love the bomb. So I think that was a great way to introduce this article here. But without further ado, brother, how are you? And please take it away.
I'm wonderful. And this was a really interesting article to get in, dig into. It was a really interesting discovery to find that the seminar, the international seminar, which was officially a summer school that was run between from 1961 on to about 1967. I think it still continued after it was revealed they had a bit of CIA funding. The international seminar had $146,000 worth of funding from the CIA. It was an actual seminar that was set up by a guy called William Elliott Yandell, who's one of the most prolific advisors to US presidents in history, 6 US presidents under his belt. He's a grandee of the Council on Foreign Relations. At that time, the vice president was David Rockefeller. And the Council on Foreign Relations is basically, for those who don't know it, kind of set up from the idea is that it's set up as a template of Chatham House in Britain, which is like about international affairs. This is all like kind of like from the times of Cecil Rhodes and Rhodesian stuff, when they were setting up groups and stuff to help influence policy from the people who really hold power, really. So the Council on Foreign Relations was the person, the people who funded this or started this course up with William Elliott Yandell. They put Henry Kissinger as executive director of this seminar. And the seminar is really interesting for loads of different reasons. I mean, I'd already researched the history of Klaus Schwab's family, and I'd got to 1973, and I had that was my first article, Schwab Family Values. I'd gone through all of the connections with his dad had with the Nazi atomic nuclear program, working as a manager in a model Nazi company, etc., Fasher Weiss. And so there was obviously it was really interesting. I got up to 1973 and I was like, oh, it's time to now probably write about the World Economic Forum and the start of it and the first days of it. And then when I went and actually looked at researching that, I found myself constantly ending up going backwards in time all of the time. And it made me realize there was a point where Schwab must have gone from being one thing, a student, a young student, a successful student who was picking up degrees left, right, and center in the early 60s, to being this person who sets up what would become the most powerful globalist institution in the world through a system of making it, calling it at first the European Management Symposium, and then a couple of years later changed it to European Management Forum, and then later on it would be called the World Economic Forum. So kind of a sneaky look, we're only looking at Europe and we're coming in slowly. And like finding out why, what was the change, what was the moment where Klaus Schwab went from being a student studying technology in Zurich and places to suddenly saying, I want to dominate the world, ha 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 ha. You know, I say that as a joke, but maybe it's not a joke. And so I went back and I found myself returning to Harvard, to where he was at Harvard. That seemed to be the place that was most interesting. And it was only after about a year of research that I really was able to focus in on the one area and realize the main point. Klaus Schwab, and I've said this in a previous interview we've done together, Klaus Schwab says a lot of things out in public. He likes to talk, and he gets asked a question about things like Henry Kissinger or something, and he'll say something and he'll say something else and equivocate, and that gives a clue to something that he's usually said by mistake or he's trying to hide. Like when he's up on stage talking about the young global leaders, he mentions Vladimir Putin. Well, that wasn't Young Global Leaders Project. That was slightly before. It was a slightly different project, and it apparently had 3 KGB agents as the Russian foremost patriot
so
program.
Putin was not a part of the WEF. That was a lie, or he?
No, he was, but it was
Okay.
a different program run by the WEF, but only for the Russians.
Okay.
And before, just a little bit before the Young Global Leader, at the fall of the Berlin Wall. So it was literally to gain power.
Based on your research, did you find any CIA funding for that particular school?
Well, I mean, here we go. This is the thing about the CIA and the C.F.R. and all of these groups. To get to that point when they've got the power enough to make the wall fall, and someone like the World Economic Forum start looking to recruit the future leaders, they have to go through a load of a process before. And that's really what this article was, understanding the process. And this is why the international seminar is so interesting, especially to a Canadian audience as well, because there's little things that happen within that international seminar and what that international seminar actually is. This international seminar was set up. Klaus Schwab's father, Eugen Schwab, who had managed a Nazi model company, had said to him in about 1963.
Sorry, Klaus Schwab's father, Eugene Schwab, managed a, pardon?
A model Nazi company, the Escher Weiss Ravensburg factory, which was helping the Germans to create the atomic bomb, was managed by Klaus Schwab's father, Eugen Schwab, all through the war. In 1938, it appeared within one of the seasonal booklets, or autumnal booklets, I don't know, biannual, maybe quarterly, booklets that was called Nazi Model Companies, and it would show all profiles of the Nazi model companies. Escher Weiss was one of them. It was of course deeply involved in making turbines for the heavy water atomic bomb project that was going on in Norway at the time, and Eugen Schwab was right in the center of that. So Eugen Schwab afterwards obviously knew, and there's evidence about, I've been told, I haven't seen this evidence yet, that the Americans did know about Eugen Schwab's atomic research. And of course he would know, or efforts with the atomic program. So of course they would have known about him anyway. And Operation Paperclip and things, there would have been certain mix over.
The Manhattan Project, the Atomic Energy Commission, those guys,
They wanted people in. They wanted people with the knowledge, so they had recruited a lot of other people who had left the naughty side of the war and suddenly become the good side of the war, which then became the naughty side. Easy way to say it. But basically, Eugen Schwab would tell Klaus in the early 60s, and Klaus would reminisce about this in an article. He would say, if you really want to succeed, you've got to go to Harvard. And Harvard at the time was a central place for the thermonuclear deterrence debate, and had all of the top people in the American thermonuclear sort of circles, you could say policy circles, all were central to that area and were around.
Sorry, don't mean to interrupt you. Would these be the Edward Tellers of the world, so to speak?
Well, you're talking. Up there was Henry Kissinger. Was at this time when Schwab is going, Henry Kissinger is the head of the School of Government at Harvard. John Galbraith is teaching agriculture and land policy or something along those lines, but really he had this special course that he set up that was extremely popular. It was like a social sciences course, and it was like, it's still today, I think, still got elements of it within their social sciences course. It got Kenneth Galbraith, known as Ken. He was one of the most important people in writing economic policy. He taught Joseph P. Kennedy and John F. Kennedy, JFK, in Harvard. So this guy's, a really big boy. He's a real big one. These guys are all there being introduced to people, and this is where Klaus Schwab would tell how he was introduced to Herman Kahn and John Kenneth Galbraith by Henry Kissinger during the international seminar. And Klaus Schwab says that he didn't attend courses in Harvard. Instead, he just attended seminars. Now, the international seminar was just a summer school and was set up by the C.F.R. and funded by the CIA, and was obviously, when you examine it, a recruitment exercise that is identical to the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leader project, but in 1967. And there's a lot happening at the time in 1967 in geopolitics, thermonuclear deterrence, understanding of thermonuclear warfare and what was actually happening in the Cold War. There was a lot developing in the late 60s during that period. And Henry Kissinger was at the center of a lot of that by the Henry Kissinger had been, he wanted to go into the CIA when he left Harvard. In 1950, had applied to be a FBI spy while he was still a student. And he was being taught by people like McGeorge Bundy and William Elliott Yandell there. So he was like, you know, being introduced into the C.F.R. group straight away. And when in 1951, when he applied to be, I think he applied for the CIA then, and then they said, no, we're going to nominate you to go and become a member of the C.F.R. And
sorry,
so he
Johnny,
went to
could you tell for the audience that doesn't, what does C.F.R. stand for?
Council on Foreign Relations.
Thank you.
So Council on Foreign Relations is the basic idea of we are the council who decide what foreign people do. That's the relationship foreign people have with the world. It's really what the Council on Foreign Relations is. It's really about making sure that they do working groups, it's scientific working groups. And at this point, identical sort of working groups were happening at the Hudson Institute, where Herman Kahn was, who was also studying thermonuclear deterrence all through the 50s and the 60s. And these working groups are the type of thing where what they do is they go through all of the disaster scenarios.
Are they what we would call nowadays think tanks?
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I would say they're think tank arms of policy institutes or government advising policy institutes. They're think tanks that are close to government, you could say. If the Swiss Policy Research can define media in that way, I think that's a really good way to define these guys.
Sorry, please, but yes, carry on.
This is like this whole area, Cambridge, Harvard, like where Harvard is, the Hudson Institute is up in New Jersey, I think. All of this area is close by to Washington. A lot of people like John Kenneth Galbraith and stuff are working down, have jobs down in New York as well, and etc. So this is it becomes a very close unit. And Herman Kahn from the Hudson Institute, let me just explain. Henry Kissinger did working groups with the C.F.R. through the mid-1950s on nuclear warfare, nuclear deterrence, etc. And then he would release something called like Nuclear War and Foreign Policy or something along those lines. Sure. In about 1956, 1957, 1958, somewhere around there. And basically that would seal him as one of the experts in thermonuclear war. Now, he had come from a think tank which already knew that if you were an expert for thermonuclear war, if you were one of the leading experts, then you are going to be able to be put in as an advisor for governments, and you will be deciding what happens with thermonuclear standoffs, etc., because there was no one else doing that sort of thing apart from, really, fundamentally at the time, Herman Kahn and Henry Kissinger. And Henry Kissinger put himself in this place, the same place where Herman Kahn already was, and they were leading towards the same thing. But what you can see in Herman Kahn, Herman Kahn was literally the expert in how to game out what will happen in the future. They used game theory. It was the first time they were really using game theory as this like sort of principle of working out what would happen in the future. So by 1966, Herman Kahn gets like taken on as an advisor for the State Department, and they start writing the year 2000, which will predict, we'll talk about a little bit later, which will predict all the technologies that are to come in the future. And honestly, still now, when you look at it, it's really hard to find any technologies we can think of that they missed in it. So they had a list of knowing already from using game theory, from using extremely complicated modeling to understand what the future would look like. And these guys did the same in the C.F.R. with thermonuclear. That's how Kissinger's able to put himself in this place at the right time and know that's the right place to be, because they know that after people have stopped worrying, after they've done all of the propaganda for 15 years after the war, saying, oh, you're going to be bombed by atomic bombs and nuclear weapons on the way, and everybody's going to die, duck and cover, and all of that. People's psychology had, some people were going mental, some people couldn't handle stuff. It was obviously they had just done too much. much. It was the start of just the war had ended, and all the military psyops people like Daniel J. Adelman, for instance, who's the right-hand man in the World Economic Forum, all went to work in PR, advertising, the media, and all put their psychological warfare skills into media stuff. So the people by the end of the 50s and coming on the earlier 60s were all in panic. Like, you know, this was really, you saw it with what happened with Kennedy and Russia and the standoff and etc.
The
and
Cuban Missile Crisis. Yep.
and all of that. Yeah. And you know, all of this came from the fear and the absurdity and everybody playing these games that they're like, oh, well, the only way we can stop from nuclear deterrence is having more nuclear deterrence and more nuclear deterrence and more nuclear deterrence. But eventually, Herman Kahn in 1961 would release On Thermonuclear War, and he would release another really important paper before. I can't quite remember what it's called, just literally the year before. And these would go through the understanding of deterrence, of what nuclear deterrence is. And that was the first stage of nuclear deterrence. They've got bombs, we need bombs. And as soon as everybody's got bombs, no one wants to fire the bomb, because if you fire the bomb, the other people will fire the bomb, and it won't be only people in your country who'll die, it'll be people all around the world who will die.
So it kind of keeps everybody right, kind of keeps everyone on an even scale.
It's like Tesla's death ray, you know. It's the idea that if anybody has a war or something, you'll blow up the world or whatever, or
right.
and is expressed in the Stanley Kubrick movie Dr. Strangelove, which is supposedly based on Herman Kahn, even though Herman Kahn says he was friends with Stanley Kubrick, and he had promised him that it wasn't based on him. I think personally, I think it was based on three people. From doing my own research, I think it was based on the very famous Fritz Kramer, who was over the top in American politics, was the mentor to Kissinger, hung around in all of these circles, advisor to all of the politics, wore a little monocle, talked in a really crazy German accent, moved his arms around loads and was crazy. Herman Kahn, it was based on for the fact that he knew everything that was going on. You know, Dr. Strangelove character, everybody goes to him and they're like, we don't know what to do. Everything's absurd. What shall we do? And he becomes the person who's going to tell him this madness. But I also think it was partially built on Henry Kissinger as well. I think this, like a mold of the three people, of those three characters together, makes a real Stanley Kubrick version of Dr. Strangelove, in my opinion. Just my opinion.
If I could say, I agree with you, because Kubrick seems to have sort of pushed the bounds a little bit, even with what's that film, Eyes Wide Shut. There's, you know, the talk behind that. But sorry, please carry on.
Well, the interesting thing about the release of Dr. Strangelove and how it relates to what we've been talking about is, at this point, everybody's scared all around the world. They've already gamed out everything through these complicated game theory processes in the Hudson Institute. They get nearly everything right. Honestly, it's really depressing. they basically learned in the 60s to know the future through game theory and people like Herman Kahn. They needed like top geniuses, and they needed the space to be able to do this. But once they had those combined, and they had the technology, or at least the mathematical technology, the idea of game theory, to implement their thinking, they were able to see the future. And everything was so absurd, and they knew they had to stop the fear, because the only things that they had worked out would cause nuclear war and the destruction on the earth was if a bomb was released by sabotage, or by an accident or a catastrophe that would happen. And they were obviously, well, the only thing we've got to look out for really is the sabotage and things like that. But that's going to come from people being panicked, be acting irrationally, and that only comes from fear. And they just created a bundle of fear about the very subject you don't want the people who are handling scared about. And Dr. Strangelove comes out, and it's a fantastic examination of the absurdity of nuclear deterrence, and how once you go past the first stage, which is what On Thermonuclear War explains, once you go past the first stage of this side has bombs, this side has bombs, neither of them are going to attack. The next stage of thermonuclear deterrence is, how do you realign everything so that you can offset the effects that standoff has? And then the third form of nuclear step of nuclear deterrence is how do you then handle all of the problems that come from all of those scenarios?
Right.
And it becomes so completely complex and absurd that everything they worked out that basically they've got to show people how absurd it is. And that was a perfect example of how absurd it is. It's like, you know, you're on an American army base where it's American soldiers shooting at American soldiers, and the commander's in there, and he's going to kill himself soon. He's going crazy and having a nervous break, and everybody's mental. No one knows what to do. All the people in power are scared, and etc. And it was an actual representation of how it felt at the time, but not how it actually was, because they already knew this. They had already. The reason why Stanley Kubrick had probably written this is because he had heard them talking about how the next stage is coming, and that was what we saw in the later stages of the 60s. Because the next stage was always going to be much more focused about Europe in general. You can have all the nuclear bombs. I mean, there was loads of plans in the 60s and the 50s. Like you could put boats all around Russia, and you could have nukes floating on little islands, like little synthetic islands. That was one of their ideas. I think it was something like 2,000 nuclear bombs, or 200 maybe I'm exaggerating, all floating on little islands just outside Russia was one of their ideas for how to make sure that they had that first deterrence. But once they had worked out that, okay, they're not going to fire and we're not going to fire, it was about then fundamentally getting control of policy on the ground in Europe to make sure that you then pressure Russia with policies that are right at their borders. And we all know that that's the problem, been the problem since, and that's what the Cold War is. It's that movement of the border backwards and forwards, and which one is the right border and who are the right people. You know, Russian speakers end up living in a European country, and speakers of, say, I know, Ukrainian end up living in parts of Russia and stuff. You know, these borders have been drawn up arbitrarily, not based upon culture, but based upon politics and based upon what they want to own through resources. So there's always going to be problems, and they use all of these different types of things for these problems, but they game it all out properly. So they needed to get on the ground. And in 1966, Henry Kissinger would be heading up, along with 5 other main people, including people from stuff like Standard Oil, Walter Schilling, I think it was, from Standard Oil and stuff, who were, and about 4 or 5 C.F.R. members on this board that was set up to advise about the policy on Europe, and how to basically pressurize American-leaning policy onto Europe. That 22-man group went away, and afterwards, what at the same time, you've got the recruitment program going on at Harvard, which is the International Seminar, which will install multiple leaders. There was a Israeli leader that came out of there. Through this very small period, there was a Japanese leader who came out of there. Of course, Klaus Schwab came out of there, and Pierre Trudeau came out of there, and I don't know who else is there.
Justin Trudeau's father came out of that school.
Justin Trudeau's father was trained through a CIA-funded program set up by the C.F.R. and run by Henry Kissinger, the same program Klaus Schwab went through. These people are all connected. That was the first World Economic Forum Young Global Leader, to that sense. The idea of it. I'm not saying it is World Economic Forum.
And
you know?
Sorry, just to refresh the audience's memory, what was it called before the World Economic Forum? What were the 2 names they had before?
Right. Okay, there was Global Leaders for Tomorrow, was what it was initially called, and then what happened, and the other one, the Russian one, and this is I've only heard reports from I've seen 2 reports on it now, and I've seen supporting evidence, so I believe it's so, but I can't say this for sure. This is as best I can. That 3 people were selected from the KGB, including Vladimir Putin, for the Russian Foremost Patriot, which was a World Economic Forum program alongside the Russian version, you know, and Russia was complicated in 1990 and 1991.
Right. Lots of possibilities for incursions from other intelligence agencies.
Yeah, most definitely.
Because of the fall of the Soviet Union.
Yeah, and I think really Gorbachev had handed over the reins of power to American intelligence. I think, you know, after that, Russia knew it was to be brought in line with a capitalist way of thinking, capitalist minded, and then after that, I don't know if it's been real or not. Most of what it seems to be is some form a psychological operation like this backwards and forwards. Putin hardly does anything. What the West do a coup in Ukraine 6 years ago, and now they're doing some sort of military thing where all of the targets seem to be distant, and you never see anything like really happening, like that makes it look like a real war zone. It's always someone saying there's people being killed in the distance over there, but we're not showing you because we're a news channel and you don't want to see dead bodies. That's not how war works. You know, if that was a war, I mean, we lived through Iraq, we lived through Afghanistan, we saw the pictures, we saw what happened at the siege of Basra. Man, that was awful. They completely destroyed the entire city, block by block by block. It was just terrible. I mean, and that was in revenge for the 4 Americans being hung up on the bridge, if I remember correctly. They purposely destroyed it for that reason. You know, it's we could talk about the hypocrisy of
actually, before, if you could just hold on to before continuing about Klaus and all of this, Riel has a couple questions, and as do I. I wanted to ask, actually, you know what? Sorry, Riel, please go first.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, man, this is super interesting. I've just been taking notes and making connections with things that you've been saying. So I've got a bit of a list here, Johnny. Wanted to point out. So Dave, you know, we've been doing our Patreon special. You and I. It's not public for. It's not on YouTube. It's just Patreon, so we can talk, you know, about things in a certain way. But very interesting is that you're joking about this, haha, dominate the world, and actually with Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, on the television station that he was a part of, there is a quote at the bottom of the website that says, we're going to try to change the world through humor, good laughs, something like that. And then, and of course, dominate the world, winky face, is the last sentence on their
and there's a winky face right after.
And there's a winky face, yes. So, you know, when I saw that, and of course, Wikipedia on their website on their page for Zelensky does talk about that, but they do not include the "and dominate the world" winky face part of that quote. So I find that very interesting. Another thing to bring up is the School of Government. So thank you for bringing this up, because in the first presentation that I did with Dave, we actually looked at Avi Loeb. And Avi Loeb is the Harvard astronomer that is the face of the Galileo project. Now, interesting to note is that the wife of Avi Loeb is the head of the department of the School of Government at Harvard. And so,
wow.
And her last name is Leviathan, which is just its own little, like, what? So, and that was, you know, that was the first thing that I got into. Was like, okay, there's a lot to unpack with all of this.
Listen, if you marry the Leviathan, you know you're in trouble. that's the worst partner to take. God.
Yeah. So when I'm bringing this up to Dave, we're trying to actually figure out what is the School of Government, and you're painting this whole background and picture to it, and it just makes so much more sense now.
Which, if I could ask to add to your question, Riel, simply because I was going to ask about this. In your perspective, Johnny, based on your research and all of that, do the vast majority of, because I think a lot of people really, especially those watching and listening, are really would want to understand, okay, we understand, we see where they are currently, but how did they get there? And you've done a great job the last half an hour of explaining that. But when people say, okay, we want to know, where does it start? The apple seed of it all, so to speak. Does that start, in your opinion, based on your research, from those schools specifically?
I think that this was the plan written out in the early 1900s, that basically the only way to properly take over the world without taking armies and going through long protracted battles, because most of the battles and army stuff that happens is done on things like the assassination of Franz Ferdinand and a load of other things on the side, and then war breaks out, and everybody's all confused and doesn't know what's happening. I think that there was a plan to, or an understanding very say the late 1800s and early 1900s, that a special leadership group is needed. And at the same time, you see a lot of the initial trusts and foundations, projects like the League of Nations, things like that pop up, that were fundamentally to try and like get that idea going, of setting up all of these different groups all around the place and trying to find out how you can get into power in one area. And people don't really understand that once one person is in the position at the top, then everybody else over a few years becomes ideologically the same because of recruitment and how recruitment works and how these people make sure that, you know, I've seen it in businesses as well. For businesses just come corrupt because the top dog is an arse, just naturally.
Right now, do you think within these schools there are a handful? I mean, we talked about last time on our last conversation about how, again, there's prospects, if you want to call it. So if one doesn't exactly follow through as planned, there's a handful of others that can continue that sort of that movement or development. Do you see this as the case with respects to, again, it's really interesting how they curate it, right? It's not one linear way of doing it, which would make sense, because then if someone like you tries to delve into it, they can easily say, oh, come on, you're telling me that, really? What are the, like, you know, they stigmatize it, right? Do you see the recruitment process continuing to this day with respects to those types of schools? Just change the names, change the institutions.
I would describe it as these people use disposable ships. So basically, to sail their ideology from one place to another, they get on a ship that's disposable, it's not attached with any nation states, it's out in the sea of ideology, and allows them a lot more wriggle room. And of course, they discovered this with Cecil Rhodes and the people who said that basically, if you make round table groups, if you make little groups that control bigger entities, and then each of those groups grow in control, then what you need is to build a structure for that. And for that, you need that round table structure. You need all of these different groups to exist that will be subservient to the top in some sort of hierarchical chain, wherever they exist within the chain. And these trusts, foundations, these projects, these international organizations, these NGOs, a lot of the NGOs were always set up, I think, with this in mind, these principal people getting in charge of an organization and probably corrupting it very early on. What's very interesting about this is all through this stage, if you're talking about the lead up to World War II and to where the atomic bomb race starts and the real technological race starts, all of these different membership groups have now been building out and building their little round table groups, etc. But in the early 30s, something happens which is really important. They discover and they realize what's coming in the same way that Herman Kahn could game out what's coming in the future. Lots of scientists back then were also doing the same thing, and some were quite good at it, some better than others, and some were very convincing because they were correct. They knew that there was something coming with atomic weaponry, and that had been really hinted at by Einstein and people beforehand, in the decades beforehand, that, you know, the potential of creating an explosion from splitting the atom was there. So these people knew what they were focused in on. And in the early 30s was the birth of the real technocratic movement. And the real technocratic movement, here we go, this is where it relates, was a membership group, was like a little round table group. The original 1930s technocratic movement was actually a group of people who all had the same ideology, who all came together to try and propagate that ideology. And what did that ideology say? Look at all this technology's coming. Look at all of these things. Look at all of these people who don't understand it. And we got too many people in the world, and all of the Malthusian stuff got linked up and rolled up in technology, because at the end of the day, they wanted to increase their abilities as quickly as possible. And I think that's the real reason why we saw World War II happen, was this build up to knowing that, okay, the biggest arms race in since time immemorial, before in all of recorded history, the biggest arms race was about to start in multiple countries, and they knew it fully well. And the war, I think, came from a lot of the fact that beneath that, there was a lot of people working very hard to infiltrate both sides to understand what their research looked like and what was going on their side. So two of the people, like I say, there's three mentors to Klaus Schwab,
Mm.
who led him to create the World Economic Forum, walked him through it, went to Europe and helped him to make it, recruited him through this CIA-funded C.F.R. course. And one of them is a very interesting.
Sorry, could you give the name of that course by chance, or is it a little too?
The International Seminar. That's what it was called.
That was the CIA-funded course.
Yeah, it was called the Henry Kissinger's International Seminar. That's what it was actually called. It was called the Harvard's International Seminar. I think it was seminar, and then it would have like summer school after it.
And did they fund it? If I may ask, if you happen to look into the finances of it, was it funded through subsidiaries, dummy companies?
It was a known CIA conduit, and it was Harvard itself that had to come out and admit it in the end in a report by Humphrey Dorman in 1967, just as Klaus Schwab's leaving after he's already been on the course. And Humphrey Dorman writes a report saying that there was this known CIA conduit. We knew it was the CIA, and they funded $450,000 worth of courses, something like that. $146,000 was to fund the International Seminar, which got the bulk of it. So there was more than just that project going at Harvard as well. The CIA, through this conduit project, a conduit company, were actually funding multiple. And Harvard would put out a press statement saying, yes, but if we didn't take the CIA money, they'd find someone else, wouldn't they? So, they were really flippant about it. And the papers reported it at the time in 1967, Henry Kissinger International Seminar funded by the CIA. So, I mean, that's
and how do you spell his name? Humphrey Dorman, D-O-R-M-A-N?
It's like D-O-E-R-M-A-N, I think his name is
Humphrey
D-O-E-R.
Oh, here we go. Got you. Wow. And it says 60. Whoa. Okay. Because here's the thing. I did want to share my screen with you very quickly to run by a couple things that you've been touching on so well, by the way. So we see here Humphrey Dorman. I just put in DuckDuckGo, CIA, Harvard, 1967. According to api.dev.thecrimson.com, CIA.
That is crimson.com is the official Harvard newspaper. The Harvard Crimson.
Humphrey Dorman's report on CIA financing gave the university a clean bill of health almost. Dorman, assigned by Dean Ford to investigate possible CIA influence, told the faculty Tuesday that CIA conduit foundations have channeled $456,000 into the university from 1960 to 1966. Now, if we do, again, with inflation, currency conversion, that's millions today.
Millions, that funded the whole course. I mean, it funded the whole course, and that, I mean, that's one of them. There's also look there, I'm down there.
Yeah, you're actually believing it. Yes, your article's right there. Yeah,
I still get you. I like coming up on search engines.
That's awesome.
It stopped happening for quite a while.
That's awesome, brother. I did. Sorry, was there something you wanted to say before about the Crimson or?
Well, I did do on the tweet thread I did for this, on the Twitter thread I did for this, I did actually like do a photo. I took a little screenshot of the actual newspaper report of it at the time as well. And like I say, there's multiple links that show that was funded by a CIA course. And I think what you've got to understand is that they had been trying to do this for ages. The 1930s come, there was this big race for the technology to be supreme. The Allies won and the Nazis lost. They managed to drop the bombs first and show everybody how good they were. Not a lot of people know that Britain at the time, Port and Down, were trying to instead drop gas on Tokyo, and we're going to gas the entirety of Tokyo with sarin gas instead of doing a nuke. That's what their plan was. But that was said, no, we want to do something proper, and then they did it, and then all of this has come from that process. And by the time it's got to this period in the 60s, from early 60s onwards, they're already deciding to build a leadership group. They're already planning on it. I mean, what we see come out in public is only after they've gamed it out. Henry Kissinger was gaming this all out for the C.F.R. all through the 50s, and then the 60s and the 70s were a result of, mostly the 60s were a result of all that. And then Herman Kahn's influence really has just taken over the rest, the future. Yeah, of course,
Wow.
Humphrey Dorman and would give a clean bill of health to
Right. So I just wanted to go over everything we've been discussing because you've been doing such a great job of laying it out for us. So this is Herman Kahn. Let's see, was the founder of the Hudson Institute and one of the preeminent futurists of the latter part of the 20th century. Let's see. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Futurists are people whose specialty or interest is futurology or the attempt to systematically explore predictions and possibilities.
He says some very interesting things about the upper class. He says some very interesting things.
Do you
about
happen to
teaching.
know any quotes off the top of your head?
Yeah. Can you play a YouTube video on here? Would that be possible?
I think we're gonna get copyrighted.
Actually, yeah. Okay, yeah. Don't do that then.
Yeah.
In 1978, I believe he's having an interview. You can type it in on YouTube if you type in Herman Kahn. It's one of the first interviews that comes up. And he talks about how sex education in school. He talks about lots of things. Herman Kahn talks about everything all of the time. It's quite amazing to listen. He's a stream of consciousness. And if you listen to earlier videos, he's like saying stuff like, why don't we just stick tranquilizer in the water supply and stuff like that? You know, he's saying really crazy things. As he gets older, he says less crazy things. I think that's because he's had lots of experience with the establishment. And in this interview that I'm talking about, he's just sitting talking to the camera. And at one point, he's talking about how the elites give sex education to their children. He said, you know, the common man, the lower class, the underclass, they will teach their children. They won't want to show their children anything about sex. They try and hide it away. They dumb it down. They say, no, God, I don't want to know about that. Where the upper class, he says, will teach their children how to orgasm. And now, do those sort of quotes that come out make you realize?
So sorry, he said that the upper class will teach their kids to orgasm, whereas the lower class
will teach them how to not only have an orgasm but have a great orgasm.
And whereas the middle to lower class, they don't want their kids, in his perspective, even touching sex.
A lot. Now let's go back a little bit, because this is really important when we're talking about Herman Kahn. The same period.
If I could just say very quickly, Riel brings up that he was born in New Jersey, which ironically is a classic home for Operation Paperclip antics. Thank you, Riel. Yeah,
most definitely.
But sorry, please. Yes.
Basically, between 1966 and 1968, Herman Kahn's officially working for the government. He's writing up these two papers. One's going to be a secret paper or a classified paper that is out now and is available on archive.org, linked within the article. And another paper is the public paper, the year 2000. Now, that's the one I've mentioned that predicts all of the future technology they went through.
This top one here?
Well, let's see. No, I'm talking on the actual article on the Dr. Klaus Schwab on Unlimited Hangout.
Oh, got you. Thank you.
It is on the where's the year 2000? Well, that if you go down, it's second link from the bottom of the article. Keep going down to the bottom. You won't be able to miss it. Back, up. Come on.
This one's
okay,
67.
nearly there. No. That's that one we'll talk about in a second. Go up a little bit more.
List of his predictions.
That one, the list of Kahn's predictions. This here.
Whoa.
So interesting. It'll blow your mind. This is basically the breakdown. And this guy at crummy.com, whoever this is who's done it, is amazing.
Thank you, whoever did this.
Yeah, this was written by Herman Kahn and Anthony J. Weiner while Herman Kahn was working as an advisor to the State Department. And this is what their project was. This was to work out all of the technologies of the future, every single thing that's going to be invented in the foreseeable future as much as possible. The green ones are ones that have already been done. The purple ones are almost there now in where we are in our reality to this day in the modern day, and the red ones are ones we have not achieved. That's why I believe the color coding is. The red ones are definitely ones we are very close to achieving. This list was worked out by Herman Kahn. This was the future in 1967. At the same time, if you go back to the article and go to the other link that was down at the bottom, just a little bit down, that one, yeah. That ancillary document, yeah, that one. This document was being written alongside it at the same time. This document will show people, as you see about Europe. Have a little look of that. The quality of American discourse today, or lack of it, can be seen as a result of loss of such common conceptual vocabulary, partly because of the fragmentation of education. Universal reteaching in the spirit of humanistic tradition of Europe, at least for a comprehensive leadership group, might be useful in many ways. Now, this document, which is like 500 pages, I think, something along those 535 pages. It's one of the most interesting piece of New World Order sort of a guide to creating the future they want that you could possibly ever imagine.
Okay,
This
so
goes
yes.
goes through how to control the booming black population, or Negro population as they call them in this document, and say that basically that's a real big problem that they're having, and loads of other things like this. This document was written alongside, because from understanding all the predictions of the future, they weren't only looking at that, they were also looking at how all of the problems in society from all of those different things, like they had done with nuclear deterrence, all of the different problems that would come from those, and how you can control it beforehand. And within this document, they basically realize that they need a special leadership group that needs to be specially trained, and they're already doing this at exactly the same time already. These guys are already involved in this, but they're saying it out loud here. The official advice is basically this is working.
In your opinion, would Trudeau's father be one of those?
Yes. Well, Trudeau's father was on the course, international seminar. He would have been introduced to Herman Kahn and John Kenneth Galbraith along with Klaus Schwab.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, these guys were all, and John Kenneth Galbraith is really interesting. We'll get onto him in a little bit, but within this document, you have basically the mapping out of how they need, what they need to do in society to make society work for them, and that those technologies be achieved in the future. And what this did, and how it's influenced Klaus Schwab is amazing, because of course Klaus Schwab is basically trying to make all of these tick 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 tick
all this
off.
And check the list off.
Yeah, check the list off, but without listening to Herman Kahn's warnings that come alongside it. Because a lot of what Herman Kahn was doing while he was writing this was realizing how dangerous the future was, and how if it went into the wrong hands, we were heading back towards something that looked like Nazi Germany. And he didn't like that. He found that, you know, he had fought against that, so he didn't like it. And once he had written this document, I think it became realized. Now he would help, he would literally go to Europe and help with convincing other people to come on board for Klaus Schwab, alongside Klaus Schwab, for the World Economic Forum, and alongside John Kenneth Galbraith. He would be fundamental in setting up the World Economic Forum and bringing attention. He would be there listening to John Kenneth Galbraith's keynote speech and von Habsburg's keynote speech at the first ever event in 1971. And in 1973, the Club of Rome would turn up with their Malthusian speech to that Schwab had put him center stage so he could get some more attention and keep it going. And Kahn was disgusted by it. He did not want the idea of, he didn't think there needed to be population reduction. He didn't need to think that humans were the enemy, as the Club of Rome were saying in their 1970s.
Sorry, John, does this go to speak to a larger concept of how even within their own factions, they have disagreements amongst one another?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, because what Kahn did next, after he tried to argue, and he would spend the rest of his life arguing really against the Malthusian principle, and he would go and he would add to the year 2000, and he would say, we need now to consider that the future holds no limits. The next 200 years was the next document that he wrote, and that said that basically we are entering into a new age where we don't have to worry about resources or overpopulated Earth, because eventually we're going to be populating other planets, and we're going to be going out to space, and we're going to be doing all of the things that are obviously coming when this technology comes. So we don't need to make humans the enemy. Instead, we need to bring humans together. Herman Kahn had to go through a lot to be eventually the one to say that out loud to these people and to the public. But by that time, these people were already in control. Now, the other man who helped Klaus Schwab, where Kissinger set up the World Economic Forum, where Kissinger was about foreign policy and thermonuclear war, and Kahn was about thermonuclear war and gaming out theories and strategies. John Kenneth Galbraith, the other man who would come to Europe and would be introduced through the international seminar and through a Harvard crowd to Klaus Schwab by Henry Kissinger, and would then go and become the keynote speaker of the First World Economic Forum, and would really help in its creation and come across to Europe and also do all of those things. John Kenneth Galbraith, a Canadian American, he was originally Canadian, and he was the guy, like I say earlier, taught Joseph P. Kennedy and JFK in school. But he also, his wife lived with Unity Mitford in the 30s in Germany. She was Hitler's girlfriend at the time, and then he went to Germany just before the war to study land policy under Hitler.
Sorry, his wife.
His wife lived in the dormitory for years with
Herman
Hitler's
Kahn?
girlfriend. No, this is John Kenneth Galbraith.
Oh, thank you, John Kenneth. Okay.
Now, John Kenneth Galbraith is the economic advisor side of it, economic policies. His whole understanding was agricultural policy, land policy. He would study in 1938. He was meant to be studying with John Maynard Keynes, but Maynard Keynes had a heart attack. And so instead he went to Germany in 1938 and studied land policies under Hitler. So it's a really strange one. And then when the war breaks out, he's in the OSS, he's in a few other groups, like he's
so conveniently, right.
Yeah. And then when the war ends, they send him back with this idea that he's going to study land policy and stuff. And then instantly he's sent to interrogate Albert Speer, who is like the Reich Minister of the War and Armaments. Yeah. Who's like one of the main people. He was funding and organizing the entire Nazi Wehrmacht. I mean, the entirety. And they choose John Kenneth Galbraith, this guy who does economic land policy, to be the person who interrogates Speer in 1945. And then he come back, and he was already writing speeches for Roosevelt. He'd already been before. He comes back, writes the draft when Roosevelt dies.
Sorry, Speer writes the draft for Roosevelt?
No.
Okay.
Speer doesn't. Galbraith does. Sorry. John Kenneth Galbraith would then have an amazing career, of course, afterwards, would become a member of the C.F.R. until at least 1973, where he says he stepped down because it was so banal and boring. He would become very close friends with JFK before JFK was when he was a junior senator. And then eventually JFK would refer to him as a Phileas Fogg after he wrote, Galbraith went out to Yugoslavia and the Eastern States during the Cold War and studying land policy.
Right, Johnny, brother, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to, since we're on this train of thought, looking at this here, by the way, this list, I cannot thank you enough, and I think I speak on behalf of the audience when we say thank you, because this helps us on our end of things in our community. Specifically, I just wanted to point something out here, list number 22, to confirm when it's in red, it means it hasn't happened yet, correct? Right. Yeah. Which is more sophisticated architectural engineering. Example, geodesic domes, fancy stressed shells, pressurized skins, and esoteric materials. Now, it's interesting because, again, it talks about new sources of power for ground transportation, EMF fields, jet turbine, certain different types of propulsion. Interesting that we see this sort of conflation between, again, your work and the work that we do here pertaining to the study of extraterrestrials and all of that. But yes.
I would say to that, and this is really important to remember, that Kahn and his message in 1974 that I just talked about there, and all of his work here, gave him an understanding that in actual fact, we were eventually going to be the ones who were aliens to other people before we see aliens ourselves. I think that's basically that the technology was leading us to become space people, to become the aliens, and that's a really interesting fact.
My research, this is why I want this to go public ASAP. My research is leading to that as well. Some sources are telling me the same thing, that humans right now, let's just say for the sake of argument, ETs in whatever form do exist, or non-humans, let's call them. It's gotten to the point now where we as humans, our human leaders, the ones that are depraved and don't speak for the rest of us mainly, have said, hold on, Why don't we do this ourselves? Why don't we do it to ourselves? That's what I'm finding in my own work. And I am shocked in a good way that this is what you're finding as well. The one thing I did want to ask, though, pertaining to this. So this is Mr. Herman Kahn. This is he had the Hudson Institute and all of that. And let me see, it was founded in 1961 in New York by futurist military strategist and systems theorist Herman Kahn and his colleagues at the RAND Corporation. So if we go to rand.org, we'll find here game theory, which is, according to RAND, the study, and I quote, of mathematical models of conflict and cooperation between intelligent, rational decision makers. Game theory is also known more descriptively as interactive decision theory. For more than 7 decades, RAND researchers have used game theory to explore economics, political science, psychology, and conflict. Now, I wanted to ask, pertaining to this here, when we take a look, for example, at this line here that I noticed, to the extent, and I quote, that we wish the educational system to preserve, enlarge, and enhance democratic procedures. Right. So when I see the word democratic, I interpret this particular sentence as something from manufacturing consent, which is
I think it's I think to enhance democratic procedures is coming from people who believe that the people who are currently voting don't understand anything at all, and so they're going to be going through processes, but it has to be correct processes, and basically we got to choose a leadership group, so that these people are selected. So their democratic processes
they're democratic by definition of, and I quote, they are effective and powerful ideological institutions that carry out a system supportive propaganda function by reliance on market forces, internalized assumptions, and self-censorship, but without overt coercion. This seems to be that right there. Without overt coercion is what I read when I see, to enhance democratic procedures. Now, I did want to ask Johnny as well, as it pertains to with the respects to manufacturing consent and all of that. We see here that manufacturing consent, generally coined by, a book by Edward S. Herman and Noam Chomsky. Do you think, for the sake of, again, the fact that this book was even allowed to be released, this is by definition, this book being put out back in 1988, was that this angle of without using overt coercion? By definition, this book could have been part of that apparatus. I'm not trying to overthink or say it's a trap.
No. I think without overt coercion, the overt coercion is like, I mean, nearly everything that we think comes from something that a load of people have told us to make us do something else. They've had to redefine words over the years, and consent and coercion are completely, they're not the same words, they're not the same meanings, but these people see us as people who can't make a decision for ourselves because we don't have all the information, but in the same time they're holding all the information from us, and they're making sure that only their leadership group gets educated. That other document also talks about lots of things. You don't have to go back to it, but the other document also talks about loads of things about creating universities to be really just suppliers for the administration, for the chosen leadership group,
to be the tools.
So there's in Herman Kahn's work, you're talking about 2 classes of people. That's what they see coming. There's the underclass and the overclass, and we're in that paradigm right now. All of our leaders have been chosen for us, and put in front of us, and we're told to choose from column A and column B, and we know it perfectly well, and that's still called a democratic process. But that is a form of overt coercion, and in my opinion.
Right, and Riel brought up something that he actually put in the Zoom chat here a little while ago. Thank you so much, brother, because I was actually going to follow along with this too. Was game theory simply the excuse for disclosing what is coming in the future, a way to bring the tech to the public from the private? Now, I wanted to, speaking of that, I wanted to ask your perspective, and I'm not trying to conflate your fantastic work with, again, what we can argue is just, a quote unquote measly article, but this is something I find interesting. I wanted to ask, before even opening and presenting this article for yourself and the audience, is there anything in your research, I know this is not your main objective, but is there anything you find, Johnny, that is so out of the ordinary, like with respects to transhumanism and the objectives that they want? For example, anything within this list that you went, what the hell? Like,
well, now here's this list.
and sorry,
if you go further down, anything that may associate with either transhumanism, I'm not trying to use selective bias, but extraterrestrial, something non-human of sorts. I think that when you start reading the ones that are a little bit some less likely but important possibilities, true artificial intelligence, practical use of sustained fusion, but some of these are really scary. Some of they just slip in conversion of mammals, humans to fluid breathers.
Suspended animation, that reminds me of those birds that people see, those videos all over the place now where birds are just stuck in the sky, people poke them, and
so look,
or
look
that's cryogenics as well.
Look two down from that, number 10.
Direct augmentation of human mental capacity by the mechanical or electrical interconnection of the brain.
All of it. Practical, number 9, practical materials with new theoretical limit strength. Number 10, conversion of mammals, humans,
to fluid breathers.
To fluid breathers. What is that meant to mean?
Right.
Direct input into human memory banks.
Mothers, holy crap.
Now this document is really important. So, and then you've got at the bottom, look, 10 far out possibilities. But we know this is what they're working on, trying to create. We know it from what they're producing themselves. Is that in actual fact, most of the research nowadays is modeled around areas that people don't want. Scientists and people who create new technologies are very risk averse. They don't want to go into something that they don't think is possible. They want to create something that's going to make them loads of money and do it relatively quickly. And we're coming up to a point where some of these new technologies won't be only game changers, they'll be paradigm shifters that will be on the level of beyond the level of atomic discovering the atomic bomb. And if that caused a world war arms race to get to the atomic bomb, then the next one is going to be even worse.
Right. I just wanted to read a couple other points here for our audience on our side of things, because this delves right into, particularly on the Patreon, a major rejuvenation and or significant extension of vigor and lifespan, say 100 to 150 years, extensive use of moving sidewalks, substantial manned lunar or planetary installations, verification of some extrasensory phenomenon. That's what people call extrasensory perception, telekinesis, all of that. Planetary engineering, I see that as like geoengineering of goddamn planet.
This is supposed to be the unlikely possibilities, but look at number 14. I would argue that's already
chemical or biological control of character or intelligence. Okay,
so that's a red, is it? Is that really red? Because there's so much here that when you actually look at it, some of the things they say, look, modification of the solar system. We really gotta wonder what we want to do and why we want to do it. Because when a kid gets something they don't truly understand and they pull it apart, this seems to be a lot of what this work has a potential of inspiring and motivating in other people who are technocratically minded or technologically minded or just want to see a different future. A lot of this got wrapped up with the idea of population control and malfusion.
Right. And notice the 10 far out possibilities they list here, and the authors write, and I quote, "We do not believe that any of them will occur by the year 2000 or perhaps ever." Oh my gosh, these guys, and this is okay. In my humble perspective, I am of the opinion that as these SOBs were writing this, they had some of this tech already. I am of the personal opinion. I want to be clear of that because I don't want that to represent Johnny's great work. But we see here some of the 10 far out possibilities. almost complete genetic control, but still Homo sapiens, or generic control, major modification of human species, no longer Homo sapiens, anti-gravity or practical use of gravity waves, interstellar travel, holy crap, practical and routine use of extrasensory phenomena. Okay. Anyways, I think our audience gets the point when they'll be listening or watching this, but I did want to ask one thing before we move on, Johnny. You had mentioned about an hour ago the focus on Europe in the long term, so to speak. Did you find a sort of realignment between the 1930s, 40s, 50s of religious institutions, financial hierarchies, political hierarchies, almost as if they all lined up horizontally to fit perfectly with one another, like a shaping operation in the long term?
Well, I think that it's like anything. People use and societies fit whatever's popular at the time. And that agenda is created. Yeah. So we know people get down with anything that's the modern thing and the modern trend. But we've kind of, like, when you research all the trends that happen and all of the things that have happened in the world, they usually are motivated by people who want to understand more about the thing and how it works socially. So they make it something big. And then often it's really bad for us too. And these people went through lots of different technologies that they thought would be the thing that could, I think they always saw this coming, the point when someone had a technology that was so powerful and so beyond a defense, you could say, that it would bring peace to earth, unite
Right.
all under heaven, like that sort of philosophy. And I think that weird philosophy has kind of stayed with humans for a long time. And so they create these groups automatically. People create groups automatically where they think, oh, listen, I can make a difference in someone's life. But lots of groups get co-opted. And most people don't have the time because they're working all the time, or they don't have the money because they got no money, because all of the rich guys have got the money to create these big membership groups. So it's more likely to come from that area. And what you find as well is the upper class tend to get hooked onto different trends in the lower class. Well, we're all playing with our spring that goes down the stairs, like they got much more sophisticated little toys, and some of their toys are humans, some of their toys are animals, some of their toys are other things that they like to disrespect or treat badly, as some form of substitute for their own feeling lack of power in the world, because the world's so complicated. So you've got these paradigms and dynamics working all throughout history, and at some point these groups get bigger and bigger and bigger. And as you look through history, you can see, like, the formation of these groups start probably, I'd say, really in the 1500s, 1400s, 1500s, with things like the Adventurers Association or whatever, a precursor to Indies Trading Company in the UK, set up by Elizabeth I. And you start to see little smaller groups realizing, okay, it's really easy back then to get into control of a certain area and dominate it completely. And if you've got the queen on your side, everybody else is buggers. So that's but over the time, it become harder and harder, and they had to find loads of different methods to keep doing their stuff, keep making their money, keep taking all of our money, keep using our work power and etc. to create more wealth for them. They had to keep finding more sophisticated routes. And it got to a point where I think it no longer became about controlling people and keeping power, because they couldn't lose power. These people were all chosen. They've all been chosen for, I mean, if we back to the early 1800s, it's so much worse than it was in the late 1900s, but the late 1900s, power. Margaret Thatcher would never have been the Prime Minister of Great Britain. Tony Blair would never have been the Prime. We would have been an alternative that was fitting or something. There's no democracy. And that idea came from the Cecil Rhodesian idea of literally choosing two leaders that are basically all of your values and all your opinions, and people will vote for them, and that's their version of democracy. It's a fake, manipulated democracy. And over time, that it became they don't have to keep power by keeping people under control. They need to just get into, they need to keep people distracted long enough for them to put in people in all of the major veins of the body, the organs of power, so that they have a central control, or at least people who are aligned and trained by them. And for that, they realize they need to literally have very powerful educational institutions that have projects working alongside governments and intelligence agencies to be able to choose those people, because most of these people who were in Harvard choosing these people, they were all Council on Foreign Relations for years.
I just wanted to say, sorry, Riel has on our Patreon Dose of Reality series. He has a fantastic weekly series that he presents to me and to us, where he talks about, again, exactly what you're saying and how one can actually view this on a local level. So what he actually did, for those that want to check it out, patreon.com/Generation Z, Riel did a beautiful job of explaining how, in the case of, say, the province of Manitoba in Canada, a politician by the name of Heather Stephenson was special assistant to the prime minister office. She's now using terms like the new normal and things like this, and she is coincidentally replacing the premier of the province and setting policies in place straight from the World Economic Forum. Thank you, Riel, for typing that out to me so I could articulate that clearly. Speaking of which, I did want to ask one thing, Johnny, pertaining to Europe, and I want to preface this for the audience because I do not want to mistake your hard work with this express.uk article. So there's like Johnny's work, and it's totally separate. I want to be very clear. Now, I did check it out before we started this. He did in fact say it. So this is why I wanted to bring it up. And I'm not trying to make any stretches or anything like this, but express.co.uk, did EU chief confirm aliens exist? Juncker speaks of Brexit to leaders of other planets. And he said, and I quote, you need to know that those who observe us from afar are worried. I have seen, listened, and heard many leaders from other planets, and they're very worried because they wonder about the course the EU will follow. So we have to reassure both the Europeans and those who observe us from afar. What's interesting is that, okay, allegedly, end quote, it was a slip of the tongue, but he didn't, to my knowledge, he didn't correct himself. There was nothing of this. What do you make of this in parallel to your research, Johnny, with respects to, the transhumanist movement, the WEF, all of that? I'm not trying to.
Okay, listen, go up there, and where it says I have listened to many other leaders from other planets, and they are worried and wonder about the course the EU will follow. If Henry Kissinger was an alien, that's exactly what he would say. Really? So I'll just I mean, think about it in general. What I'm saying there as well is, like, what people are on, you, me, everybody, all of the people watching Real, everybody, they're on this hunt for the truth, and that truth can exist outside our Earth, because in actual fact our Earth is just like, we can't even put down a percentage of where our Earth shares with the universe. It's just impossible. So we got this big space. We know there's loads going on out there, and there are a lot of people who in early 2020 and the end of 2019, from the American establishment, who were all former heads of stuff, who were all C.F.R. members and people like that, who started saying that about like alien life, and saying statements just like this. And it was really notable at the time. It was just before COVID, and it was really notable at the time. It happened as well through I think at the end of 2020, one of the big chiefs said something, who had just stood down as well. And it's notable that it is all coming from America. And America are running out of really running out of options on how they distract people. And they're trying to pick up on something which I think people are already well aware of. We're one step away. It's always been, if we game theory things out, a lot of the times we do it through movies and stuff. For humans, make movies to understand the world. There was no better way to understand the 15 years of panic than Dr. Strangelove. We have these movies for a reason, and I think like it's us trying to make sense of things. And I think if you go back to a movie that I love, that relates very much to this. Star Trek First Contact. Saw it in the cinema. I was kissing a girl in the cinema while I was watching it when I was young. I must have been about 14 or 15. No, she was lovely. We were so in love. And there's that one interest, and the whole point of it is they've discovered the technology that drives humans to be able to have warp speed, and a Vulcan craft out in the distance is able to sense that vibration energy being used and is passing by, and is just that coincidence that leads to first contact.
Right.
And I think they've gamed a lot of this out over and over, and we're approaching a realm of technology where I think my partner in crime, Whitney, would say it best, where, you know, we're reaching a point where they want to create like AI singularities, which is alien to us anyway. I mean, that is like alien on Earth within technological in a technological sense. It's like creating an alien entity, and at the end of it, as Whitney says, they don't really know what's going to happen because it'll probably hate them all. You know, the fact is they're trying to create things. They don't know what's going to, but they want to see. It's a Pandora's box. And that's what Herman Kahn offered people in 1967. He opened Pandora's box truly, fully, for the first time. You know, for the first time since before all of Einstein's really big like moves in the early part of the 1900s, his really big papers that changed and led to the big arms races and the things that would come, like Nobel himself making TNT, and that would lead to wars and etc. And it's a Nobel Prize. You know, those people lead on to doing stuff. Herman Kahn, all these people opened up a Pandora's box that could never be closed again. And Herman Kahn did that in 1967. And that's what we're heading towards. We're heading towards trying to get to technology that allows us to get away from ourselves, because I think that's the psychological projection.
I'm in full agreement. Yeah.
If someone from American State Department or a former American chief of something, or someone high up in some sort of agency says to you anything at all, whether you believe it to be with your own viewpoint and could correct you have to dismiss it. You have to. The big boys up there, they're manipulating society all the time. You have to say, I'm looking for evidence. I'm not willing to take evidence from someone who lies to me every single breath, and I'm only willing to accept evidence from when they agree with me. That's the wrong way to look at how evidence is. It's the wrong way to find sources. It's the wrong way to literally, it's the wrong way to live your life. You can't listen to someone lying to you all the time and only believe them when it suits you. And that is a lot of the problem with these people who come out and say, who are really high up in authority and really have been manipulating things behind the scenes. When they say something, you've just got to dismiss it, whatever it is, whether you agree with it or not. And trust me, they've dragged me back in to many years ago. They've dragged me back into believing in political systems and stuff through doing that, through I disagree with everything they say apart from that one thing that I really agree with, and so I desperately want to. And they've never given me that one thing. You know, I've never seen that one thing. These people do not possess the knowledge, and they do not possess the power. They are the ones who say it out loud definitely don't possess the power, definitely do not possess the knowledge. And if there is, and I'm not only of the earth, I'm of the universe. I really do believe that one day we will get off this rock. And it seems like technology for everybody is simple. It seems to increase exponentially, and that is crazy, because I mean, if technology at the start, like really high to technology once upon a time was a metal fork, then like the height of technology now compared to that is just crazy. And it's I still don't understand how we're having a conversation over a webcam and I'm talking into a microphone and you're hearing me. I still, as a human, I don't understand the basics. I wouldn't necessarily know if I saw something bigger, if I saw a technology or a creature that was bigger than it. I don't know if I would be able to recognize it.
Brother, you nailed what we discuss on our channel pertaining
Yeah,
to perspective perfectly, in my opinion.
When an idiot American politician or former head of something saying something, I can't believe with what they tell me if they have breakfast in the morning, whether they have muesli or not. I can't believe them. You know, so it is a case. We've got to remain the way they pick at people who search for the truth, whether it be the truths that I'm searching for or the truths that you're searching for. The way they pick them apart is by just attacking them and taking little things they say and twisting them and putting things in their head and making them trust them. You know, giving them something that they want so that you'll trust them and see it, just like a pedophile offering a sweet to a kid on the street corner. You know, that's what you've got. You've got to come down to base terms. That guy who's saying, oh yeah, the thing you believe in is true, is just trying to abuse you. That's it. So I would say, you know, if we're going to learn a bigger truth and we're going to find out that there's something already happened,
right,
that's going to come apparent when some other entity wants that to happen, and we won't even see that until it happens.
Johnny, can I just say on behalf of myself, Riel, and the rest of the community here that's very much into the, I mean, we seem to attract people that are into intelligence operations, you know, paranormal things, extraterrestrial, because we have multiple different series. But can I just say, for someone of your stature and research and you know, being with Unlimited Hangout and Whitney and all that, I want to thank you on behalf of myself, Riel, and everybody else for attempting to do your absolute best to merge your work with ours and not making it seem like we're crazy, so to speak. So I'd like to thank you on behalf of everybody.
I mean, I tell you what, you know, growing up in a world where all we've ever been brought up on, I mean, I've been bottle fed sci-fi because I love it, man. I love it. I've been bottle fed technology because I love it. I've got to the point where, you know, lots of people I know went completely the opposite way. We're like, I'm so fed up with technology. I don't want any technology in the world. I want to live in the middle of nowhere,
right,
and I don't want to do anything. Well, I want to buy an NFT every now and again. You know, I want to do the things that I don't want. I like human creation and culture and how it manifests, whether it be virtual or physical or digital. I like the idea that we can search for truths that are beyond just an earthly, stupid, humanistic way of looking at things, because we do. Part of the reason they mix up this idea that humans are the enemies of humankind themselves is, sorry, my dog's growling at me.
Oh, no problem.
that humans are the enemy. That part of the reason they get this thing inside them is because they hate themselves. I mean,
yes,
most of us on Earth, there's stats about body language and talking where people lie nearly 70% of the time in nearly everything they do when they're in the social situation.
If I could say, speaking to Miss Maria Farmer, who's been nothing but absolutely kind and great to us here in the community and all of that. If there's one thing I've learned, obviously with her experience firsthand, is that these people don't, at least according to Maria's experiences, they don't live what we deem to think of happy lives. They wake up every day constantly worrying about staying in power. And you know, I thought of something. Isn't that interesting? That's sort of like if you scale it down to a local level, that's kind of like someone who constantly lies. They can never be at peace because they need to keep covering up their lies. And when things are okay for them, they're concerned if a lie is going to be exposed. You see what I'm saying?
One thing I'd say, you know, I like to people all the time, and one thing I've learned really early on from talking to loads of people is they'll tell you if they lie compulsively right at the start of your relationship with them. They'll always do it. Every single person who I've known who compulsively lies, it tells you at the start of some type of like warning. Will not say it again afterwards properly.
But sometimes they say it jokingly, but they mean it.
Yeah. But they literally is people are very peculiar characters who are completely and utterly psychologically messed up by the sinister world we live in, all of the shit we put inside ourselves, the way we live our lives, and what we respect and what we don't respect. And most of all, this idea that we are the problem, should hate ourselves. And that added on top of our own personal issues, our own issues about how we think we look to the outside world, to us, and all the really insignificant things. On top of that, that makes us act under situational pressure, and that situational pressure makes us decide on doing silly things. And often, if you have enough situation in someone in their life has many situations which are of pressure, eventually they'll put their hands up and they'll concede, and they'll accept they can't do anything about it. And we've got to a point where we really are trying to work together to look at this like idea of where we're going to go for the future. Let's love this. Let's do this technology stuff with love. And a lot of these people are based, the elite of society are based upon, and we can all taste it and find it in our own lives, when every now and again we've got money to survive and we don't have to worry for a bit. Everybody's had it. I've had times where it can be completely the opposite, but everybody's had it, where you have a bit of time where you don't have to, and you feel, oh, I could actually do a few things, and suddenly you get greedy. You know, it's so natural for us to do, and you start that nothing, however much you earn and however much you do, you're not going to be truly happy until you actually learn what being a human is and how to interact with other people, and learn to let other people into your own life, because every single human is crap. Every single human is crap. It's just one person. It's the humanity is a collection of this crap that makes wonder, makes brilliance, makes
And
no
you're
one
saying
can be wonderful with no one else.
Right, you're saying to delve into yourself, understand, like the dissolving the ego, realize, okay, hold on, why did I freak out with my partner, for example, when maybe I should not have?
But with money comes ego. Money is ego.
Right.
Money, riches is ego. What am I wearing? What am I doing? You know, you cannot, when we go to a school disco as a kid in a normal high school, and you put on your best stuff and you're going through all of your stuff over and over, and you're like, oh my God, I don't even have like a leather jacket or anything looks cool. What am I going to do? And then you go there, and at the end, it doesn't matter, of course, everybody dances and stuff, but there's this moment where everybody's judging each other and looking at each other and commenting on each other, and etc., etc. When you're rich and you're elite and you can afford anything there's nothing you can turn up at that party which isn't going to make you look around and go, there's loads of people who are much better dressed than me. There's loads of people that look much better. I've got to do better next time. I've got to keep trying harder. And that superficiality is all over their lives,
can I just,
you know?
right, and to add to that, I actually I will give a little bit of a personal example. An old, I guess we could say, family friend of mine, he essentially said one time, he goes, Dave, I've been in a room where you had one guy worth 10 million and another guy worth 12 million, and the one worth 10 couldn't stay in the room for more than maybe half an hour because he was jealous of the one worth 12 million. If that doesn't speak to how they just want more and it never ends, I don't know what does. You know,
well, I've seen it come out over and over. I've met people who are really greedy. I've been friends with people who are really greedy, and I've been really flippant all my life about money. You know, I never really respected it, never appreciated it. Learned to live on less than a dime. Had my moments where I had months on just one piece of cheese on toast a day. You know, I struggled through all my life, but I learned to be happy. To learn happiness with a banana and maybe a bar of chocolate if I'm lucky, and some tea. That would be nice for me.
And I bet with a nice joint and all that, you're happier than all of those guys at the top.
But all of those guys at the top cannot even fundamentally find something that could make them anything they get. It's all the toys you buy are just going to end up in your wardrobe. All of the cars they buy are going to end up in their wardrobe. All of the things they're going to do are not going to bring happiness. Everybody knows that when you get money, what you do is you ignore your own you don't respect yourself, you don't respect your relationship so much, and you end up spending loads of money and ignoring everything and trying to distract yourself by it. That's an elite life. That's what they do. They just go in, they don't respect themselves, they don't respect their friends. They're in a competitive state all of the time. Competitive state means that you're willing to do things to win, and that then goes out in how they act in the wider society. And then when they see people like us, what you've got to realize is that really, when we say upper class and lower class, you could say competitive class and non-competitive class. We
I
are
like that.
the people underneath are the people who are not necessarily trying to compete with each other and are just trying to get by in life, just trying to meet. Yeah, they got small competitions, but it's not like you're trying to take someone's life off them, their house off them, their land off them, destroy their water supplies, destroy their way of living, destroy their culture.
I've seen people with wealth, if I could say, look at people with no wealth in terms of the financial resources, and those people that are, I guess you could say, quote unquote, financially poor, if you will, happy, more into themselves, not in a selfish way, but understanding themselves, able to control themselves in the moment, stay calm and all of that. And those people with money are secretly envious. I've seen it firsthand, envious of that person who has no money, but they're wondering, how are they able, what's this aura about them that they're able to control themselves in a way that I can't? That means more to them, whether they realize it or not, than I think the money. Because
I've seen that in working in 5-star hotels. When I first started working in hotels, I worked in like a Hilton. It was 5-star.
Wow.
It was crazy. It was like seeing behind the curtain, proper seeing behind the curtain. I'll tell you some stories about that eventually one day. And what you realize is that nearly every single one of these people will, and not just because they're in a hotel, they will always be drinking to excess, doing drugs to excess, trying to stop themselves from thinking, trying to stop themselves from focusing. And I used to be someone who, because I when I started off there, I was a night porter, and I would just be constantly in and out of people's rooms all night, either trying to stop them partying or helping them party, because I was young and I enjoyed it. And what you would discover is that every single one of them were lost, and nearly every single one of them, once they had got to a certain stage, would be in tears and crying and telling me all of their problems. They would tell it me, and everything. It was just like pathetic problems. It wasn't even real problems. These people have what they think is problems is just all them saying, and then my ego got hurt, and then they did this, and my ego got hurt, and now my ego's hurt. Ego,
Johnny,
and that's all you can hear.
I want to say, I'm sure there's a handful of individuals out there in the world who come from money that are very nice people, to be clear, but a good chunk of them, even from my own experience, has literally translated to my ego was hurt. My ego was hurt. All about that. And then how can I get back at them? And then it never ends. It never ends.
Loads of lovely people live on both classes, and it's all very, everybody can be really nice, and the real enemies are dotted. The enemies of society, the ones in control, are all dotted amongst the upper class, all in amongst families full of very nice people, full of very pleasant people. But what you'll discover is that when the shit hits the fan, they will close ranks. However nice they are to you all throughout it, they will close ranks straight away. Their class is above all else the thing that needs to be protected, and they've got all of the money, they got all of the military, they got all of the governments, they got everything under their power, and they will crush the underclass if the underclass tries to raise up.
You ever heard the saying, you'll find out what someone's truly like if you put them in a corner?
Yeah. I've put a few people in the corner,
right? And then you find out what's.
To be perfectly honest, I have to stop doing that to an extent, because I'm in a position where I have got to be more careful about who I'm picking fights with.
I can hear you on that one,
but
lightly.
I will always say directly to someone, honestly, what I think the truth may be, and say that's what I think. And then it's up to other people to go away and work it all out, because that's the whole of life, isn't it? All of this stuff, we got to stop listening to people, and we've got to do our own research, because part of what the problem of what we just talked about there is that there's a base level when the people in the underclass have not been educated enough on purpose. They've been left in dysfunctional homes, dysfunctional schools, dysfunctional social units, etc. So they still haven't been educated enough to be able to realize that they're being taken for a ride. And that's really all we have to do, is educate the people on the bottom enough that they realize they're being taken for a ride. Then everything will change. And when enough of them realize they're being taken for a ride, then something will change. That's why we constantly have the paradigms, political paradigms, and global geopolitical paradigms shifting constantly between things every couple of years, and they have to keep doing that. For us in Britain, it was like, Corbyn and May, and then it was Brexit, and then it was COVID, and now it's Ukraine, Russia, and it's like every 2 years, for 2 years, boom, 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 boom,
almost
boom, boom.
would you almost as if, whether literally or metaphorically, something or someone is staring at the planet going boop, and wherever they touch is wherever a panic occurs to distract. Boop, okay, let's touch, boop, boop.
I can understand that way of thinking from the fact that sometimes, especially when it comes to war and stuff, all I see is I was brought up playing Axis and Allies with my dad. Like that's the only thing we did that we got on with. Most of the rest of the time we were
Battleship,
arguing
all
about
that stuff. Right.
But Axis and Allies was like the upper crust war gaming of World War II and stuff, and it was really like complex. I used to end up playing against loads of different war gamers from like the age of 8, 9 all the way up. I just had all of this experience of seeing the world from an exterior point of view, and I think you alienate yourself from this earth by looking at a map and pieces on a map and thinking that's the earth, and that's what a lot of people do. They the maps give us the history of maps give us a weird, and if you open a road atlas and stuff, you're likely to think that every single part of your country is completely built on, like in Britain, in the UK, if you type into Google how much of the UK is built on, it'll tell you less than 1% is built on. So that's like, oh, there's loads of land and loads of stuff. Why wouldn't they want us to be out on land? You ask someone in the park, they'll say 8%. A guy screaming at me the other day, no, it's got to be 8%. You can check it. No, it's got to be, because it's there's this feeling that we've been given that we're destroying everything and we're doing all of this.
Do you think there's this feeling that the system is inherently trustable from the get-go, which is also what seems to be, because you can, I have actually, okay, I'm not going to say that on publicly, but there are people I know, you can show them the words and they no, like you can show them word, like when there's footage of Klaus Schwab saying we penetrated Trudeau's cabinet, and what does that mean? I don't know, but if you ask what that means, those type of
specifics, right? That person I was talking about in the park the other day, who was telling me about how overpopulation is taking over and global warming is going to kill us all, and was screaming 8%, and was fundamentally, I tried to dig away at what he believed and where he got his information from, and he gave me two things very clearly, that he reads The Guardian and he reads Science. That's the two things. Now, I was really finding it hard to argue with that, because it's like, how do you argue with such for me, a dumb comment? For him, a sensible comment. For him, he's saying, I read this sensible newspaper and I look at science. But I thought about it for a couple of days, thought about, like, just in the background, had it in my head, like, how do I have a conversation with someone about that? Or how do I get past that moment? Because I've had it a couple of times. And I thought, well, what reporter does he read in The Guardian? What scientific paper? And it's all about specifics. If someone gives you a generic answer, just ask for a specific. Say straight away, oh, that's okay. The Guardian is a load of reporters reporting on loads of different stuff. So which reporter is it?
You know what happens when you ask for specifics, article? Right?
You get them realizing that their whole the thing they just said isn't something they want to repeat again.
Well, that's like at the UN, when actually, hold on, this episode's going to go public, so I want to be careful. But point being, certain issues about certain things were brought up at the UN. I'm sure you know. Syria, the Ukraine, all that, and then they would answer at the panel, but then the second journalist would have a little bit of scruples, let's say, and try and ask for specifics. They would immediately go to like jerking each other off at the panel, just say, oh, question answer over, how dare you ask that, and then applaud each other.
Yeah. These guys have run out of answers. They don't have things that they can give us to tell us that will work. They are down to constant military style psychological operations on civilians, and this is why what was so amazing while I was writing this last article, I'm researching all about the nuclear deterrence paradigms, all of the people involved in it, and all of the ideas behind it, the philosophy. And at the same time, I knew things were about to change from COVID, and then it flipped really quickly to exactly the thing I was researching for, right deep into research in this thermonuclear deterrence paradigm. And it was seriously all of the talking points from the 50s and early 60s. And I felt like maybe they should make Dr. Strangelove too. Maybe that's the thing that'll knock them out. Because the problem we've got here is that people have been taught so badly, they can't see the obvious lessons from the past that everybody learned in the past by having to be explained, bottle fed, because we are literally without a clue. We are not schooled properly. We are not educated properly. The majority of our governments control us by trying to stop us doing something over here by saying something over here that's something else, and trying to maneuver and coerce our behavior. And that's not a consensual relationship. There's no way is coercion and consent in the same area of reality. So we've really got to stop letting them coerce. Now, one thing you were talking about earlier, where you were talking about people talking on stuff, and noticing how they're on the mainstream media, and noticing how they're obviously tools for the establishment. I noticed something the other day is that I can now recognize a Council on Foreign Relations member nearly like that. We in my house, we very rarely put on the mainstream, but every now and again on YouTube we'll stick on Channel 4 or CNN or something and see what their take is on the angle, so we can get the whole angle. And me and my housemate were sitting down and we flicked on the first thing to look at a little bit of Channel 4 news, and the one woman on there, instantly it was, I reckon she's C.F.R. Look, listen, you type in a name and then you type C.F.R. and then you discover they're C.F.R. It's really easy, because the C.F.R. will tell you. All of they publish all of their work.
The Council on Foreign Relations will 100%.
They will. And then the next one we put on, I was like, oh, that's funny. I can spot a C.F.R. now. Next one I clicked on, it was a CNN one from the other day. There was two panelists speaking, and I was like, oh, but both of these are C.F.R. And I went away, looked, both of them were C.F.R. It's got to the point now where they can no longer trust people to say the things. The message has become so complex to the messaging that they're trying to send out.
They can't bring people on that to even offer
they can't bring basic
view.
People.
Yes.
They can't bring, no, but they can't bring basic people on to even manipulate a view in a basic way, because it's all so complicated that those people will get stumped at the most simple of questions that are given to them by someone who's on their side anyway, and is the manufacturer. It's got so complex they can't answer the questions, so they have to have the top brass in.
They need script writers.
They need the top boys in. They need the people who are actually behind the politicians now, speaking on the news all of the time. So nearly all of them. If you see people on the news nowadays, they look a bit grey in the skin. They've got a long face, a nice long face. They need a really long, an incredibly long face, kind of like the Beano or the Dandy.
Do you notice as well too, by the way, the I guess you could say the Don Lemons of the world, if you will, the I was going to say the Chris Cuomo's, but he's gone and all that. They seem to, or even the one could say that, okay, Piers Morgan, maybe he's a little different, but he just wants views and clicks. But they seem to be lacking an internal understanding of themselves, and it seems as though they're looking for that acceptance and reassurance from the establishment that they are like a drug. They're chasing, but they never feel like they have it.
Yeah, I think that if you're talking about someone like Piers Morgan is kind of balls out. He's discovered that if you say anything with confidence and belief, people will believe it, whether or not it's true. So that's his style of doing things.
That's his shtick, so to speak.
Yeah, Don Lemon and people, they're the lowest form of intelligence on these sort of channels for coercing people. If people believe Don Lemon, then you can't even have a conversation with them about other stuff, because they're not ready to get out of that very, very simple stage. They're still in nursery school if they believe it. They're
nothing
Don
wrong
Lemon
with that, but you just can't talk with them, right? exactly.
Some of the things he said, especially over the past 2 years, have been obviously manipulating people's opinions of certain items and certain health benefits that can come from certain things. And he obviously, these people are put in charge. Wolf Blitzer, how many movies has Wolf Blitzer been in? You remember when he's in Mission
Yeah,
Impossible?
Mission
You remember,
Impossible.
isn't he the one in The Game with Michael
Yep.
Douglas, which is all about setup, and he's the one on the TV with the puppet in the house? It's like these people are completely and utterly like the media people. Our media people, they're actors. They are they don't get up out of their chair and scream, "I've had enough. I'm not going to take it anymore." They don't, because they are the ones who are in the power. I can't even imagine what it's like to go somewhere, because I thought about, as a journalist, I thought about the idea, as an independent journalist, I thought about the idea of going. What if I went to the mainstream? What if I applied for a job in a paper and they actually said, okay, you can write for us? And I went there. What would I do? I'd be writing whatever the boss told me to write about something I'm not interested in at all, and my life would be dull and boring and unhappy, and I would be susceptible to all sorts of things. Because one of the most important things in life is that you have to live and work at the moment. That's the way we live, and we got to enjoy and love what we work, because otherwise we get really sad if we don't. And if we get bored at work constantly, every day you're going in and you're doing the same thing and it's monotonous, eventually your psyche will break because you're not enjoying life.
Right.
And they know this very well. They keep people in work that is completely mundane, completely and they don't make it any better, and they do it because they know that we will literally break easier. We will accept whatever they say easier, just because we're so sad.
And if I can give
Then you
yeah.
don't look at yourself. If you're that sad, the point is you don't look at yourself. You don't want to. You can't barely look in the mirror. You can't look at who you
Okay,
are.
so if I can give a real life example, you've come home from a 10-hour shift at wherever you work, and you just hate where you work, and you come home and you don't even have the energy to flip on the news. The last thing you want to hear is any of that kind of stuff. So you just kind of go, I'm going to go along with it. Screw it, because my life sucks anyways.
And so what do you see? What would you expect to see from that? You'd expect to see people waking up, having their food, getting on the bus all tired, going to work, coming home, having some food, watching some TV that doesn't cause them too much distress and harm, going to sleep, waking up, going to work. Our lives, what it really is made up a collection. At the moment, most people are made up a collection of TV shows that they enjoy, films that they like, and ignoring the actual reality of what's happening in the world.
And what you're saying, however, if I could gather, is that you're saying there's nothing wrong with those types of hobbies or things, but it's life is way more than that.
Well, at the moment, we've all. I mean, I would love to be in a place where I could spend a load of time watching the newest films that have come out and going through. Before I was a writer, I'd spend sometimes like 4 or 5 days where I barely sleep at all, and I just watch every single movie that's come out over the past like month that is worth watching. I love taking in sort of, but it also is distracting. It stops you worrying about life. It stops you thinking about things. I always had concerns, and I'd always let them build up, because you can nerd out, you can geek out, get away from your problems. Everybody knows it. We all do it in loads of different ways. That's not just with sci-fi movies or things. That was also with just like some people like to go to a restaurant to geek out over being at a restaurant. There's loads of different things we do to distract ourselves, because we're unhappy with ourselves. We're unhappy with our lives. We don't feel that we're going to make it. But the more we look at ourselves, and more unhappy we are, and our brain recognizes that spiral and switches off the ability for us to say, you've got to look at yourself.
I couldn't, brother. I couldn't agree more, Johnny. I did want to give, before we wrap this up, if it's all right, Riel a chance. If you had any questions, Riel, if that's cool, if you wanted to ask Johnny a couple of them.
Well, thanks, Dave. Yeah, this is really interesting. I do have questions, but for the sake of this staying public, I'm probably going to hold off on a few of those.
Sure.
But I did want to mention how the group. So we're going back to the group with the Council of Foreign Relations. There's the Scientific Working Group, and that's super interesting because obviously now we know trust the science, and on our Dose of Reality show on Patreon, we're exploring the concept of science as a macrocosmic topic and how it's directly related to war, weapons, killing people. Yet here, and just looking into the backstory of all this, super interesting. And there was one group that you mentioned there were 22 members of. What was the name of that group?
It was a European Advisory Panel, or the Advisory Panel on Europe, I think it was called.
Right.
Wait a minute, I can have a look now. I don't.
And just the reason why that I bring that up, because that number stands out to me, because 22 is actually how many paths there are on the tree of life in Kabbalah. So I wonder, in an like to kind of make it a little bit more esoteric, these people that are getting together, that are using gaming theory on predicting all this new technology. Now, what else are they doing behind the scenes? What sort of societies are they a part of? What sort of religions do they subscribe to? What are their spiritual beliefs? And so that was just an interesting thing. I wonder if you've come across any of that sort of stuff in your research, Johnny, about maybe that they are like Kabbalah magicians or something like that.
I would say the Herman Kahn later stuff that he talks about really suggests that he's seen some stuff. I would say Kubrick, and the fact that he hung around with all of these people, and then all of his movies. I mean, some of them at the time, he's hanging around with a load of people who later on were like, oh, they're the people who organize compromise operations where they got children in with politicians and stuff. And Kubrick's a man who makes Lolita, and then you've got like the want for the space race and the Reagan year, and he's the one who makes 2001 The Space Odyssey, that again Kahn related in the sense because he was the one who wrote the year 2000, visioned the idea of this being could be a super technological, already up in space sort of a thing. Where were we? Sorry, with the dark arts and the more esoteric stuff, yeah, there's traces of people who are in membership groups all over the place. But I get a feeling that what I do, and the reason why I miss out on some of this, not all of it, I do cross over. I do see a lot of it. I have studied a lot about that sort of stuff because obviously it comes up. I see that as kind of like one of like a selection of the churches of the elite. So and we have am I still on? Yeah, good.
Yep.
We have like we have normal religion, and we all come together and we join within our community and stuff. Well, their community is a lot smaller. They think they know a lot more, and to an extent they do know a lot more because they've been taught a lot more. But that also works in a way that it motivates and inspires human fantasy, and they don't lose any of their fantasy in the elite world. They just replace what they see, or what we do in a fantastical way, they do in a much more elite fantastical way. And religion, I think, is one of the branches of that. And it really, I think they're esoteric religions. I don't think they hold any power apart from they give people confidence. These people confidence in what they do.
Could one argue that the confidence is that power?
Yeah, because the fakeness of saying, like, you go to a place with loads of elites who are about to make your life and all your dreams come true by their access to levers of power, and they're telling you if you do this ritual you're going to get rich and famous, and then you do a ritual and you get rich and famous. We're always going to get rich and famous if you do the ritual. That's the whole point of them doing it, to get you through sort of thing. And then it's nothing esoteric about the fact that they've got they're in control of all the levers of power. But it's like, it's like the compromise operation for the elites to bring them in a sense. It's like, you go through this ritual, you're one of us, then you can never talk about the ritual. So
because then we'll expose you and say, look how ridiculous this person looks.
Yeah, and that allows people who are entering into this world, who are going to experience that sort of a blackmail in loads of
Right.
different forms throughout their life, to think about that and decide whether they want to enter into that world, because they're about to enter into that world, and that's what they do. They sign themselves over. You know,
Yeah.
if you've really got a devil, or you've got a guy who has all of the power and could be like a devil, you know, and someone signs their name over to them, it's the same thing. They have all the power over them. They have, you know, it is a very like weird concept that someone would sign over their life to someone else, but these guys do that through these groups, through going through these rituals, and those rituals are there as a form of grooming process that have worked for a long time to be able to manipulate and pull out certain people. And where a lot of my work doesn't meet up with this is because I'm busy looking at not their spiritual life and not what they do on the weekends. I'm looking at what they do in the weekdays when they're in work. So I'm looking at the actual power that
Right.
the structures, and I'm trying to explain it, because if I start to talk about the other like stuff I've researched, a lot of the people who I can wake up to things will go, oh my God, I'm not going to listen to this
I
guy.
understand that. I
But the
can.
first
Yep.
step is understanding that there's malevolence. And then the second step is understanding how the human psyche works in with different motivations and different stimuli, and how it fractures as
It's
well.
interesting, if I could say quickly, it's interesting to see within optogenetics and biology and physics and what have you. There seems to be something to, I don't want to say prove, but evidentially substantiate that maybe not necessarily the ritual per se, but the context of one's mind neurologically believing so heavily in that ritual can substantiate some form of, again, something in the microtubules of the brain that help you sort of manifest your reality, as they say.
Yeah, I think we all project this out in different ways. So for me personally, if I was to say the thing that makes me feel the strongest, the thing that makes me feel most spiritual, the thing that makes me feel most in touch, is being under a tree, connected with the grass and connected with the ground, feeling like away from everything. You know, a lot of people have to have a connection with something, and if they don't have that connection, if they don't have that spiritual connection to something, then they find themselves lost, and they don't have the ability to appreciate that basic things. And that spiritual connection, then if that your spiritual connection is with a bigger truth, is raping and abusing people, then you know, you're going to go around doing that to achieve what you think is spirituality. At the end of it, it's only going to be darkness, it's only going to be
Yep.
hurt, it's only going to be pain, and it comes back around to form. But these people have a weird version of spirituality, a weird idea of what spirituality is. So where I would say my most spiritual moments come from being connected with the ground, and being connected with listening to the birds and having the air going through, hitting my face. These people would find that to be silly, banal, stupid, and etc., would not be able to appreciate it, and they would find their spiritual fulfillment from overpowering another person, from having power over another person. So they're not talking about the connection with the land, or connection with an upper god, or a connection with their societies seem very fake in the way they do things, because their actual actions are very human, very base, and they're dressing them up so they don't look like the basic pedophile murderers that they are.
Right.
That's sorry to say that out on YouTube, but you know, that a lot of the people who dress up and do all of these things are just hiding as much from themselves as they are from other people.
Right.
These are all little gowns and cloaks to give them a reason why what they're doing is correct, so they can continue doing it. Because if they were to look at themselves properly and look at what humanity means, and if they knew how to love, these guys are brought up in a weird world, man. They got some sick,
I agree.
twisted parents, and they're brought up with these weird rituals that go through their lives, that are there to
Right.
break their own children so that they can be in control.
Some of them,
you
I
know?
would dare to say, even have kids to do that deliberately to them with that.
I'd say Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell, 100%. He'd choose the three whips. He'd lay
Ghislaine
them down
Maxwell's
in front
father,
of
yeah.
Ghislaine, and he would say, which one do you want? And she would happily choose the one that caused most pain because she liked it. The weird pseudo-sexual relationship between the elites and their children are the thing that Herman Kahn says himself, the one of the mentors of Klaus Schwab and the man who was the real, they really do see sexuality as different, really different, and we can't understand that. I think it's one of the main reasons why we're at war. It's one of the main reasons why there's an ideological war, and it comes up over and over again. If people haven't worked out by now, that the real thing is that the class underneath isn't so keen with how they view the class above view the world, because how they view the world is distorted, weird, funky, and it also affects all of the people who are around us. So the way they treat us and the way they keep us in these cages mean that we see the same behaviors that they choose to do manifest through like other ways, and it's all a part of it is all the pressure on humans in the situation, their environment, and how they act from those pressures. That's really it. But in amongst all humans, whether they be elites, innocent, guilty, whatever, they all have a preference. There's always a small group who have a sadistic preference to whatever criminality they put out. They will be sadistic in their preference. There is a small group on earth who are sadistic. They're the ones who gain power because sadistic people can do the cruelest things to get rid of somebody else out of their way so they can get their position and their job.
That's that whole we're willing to do things others aren't, and they try and flip it to justify.
Herman Kahn was given permission to given an ethical and moral space to think the unthinkable. That's what they said, and that's what they think they are. They think they're clever. They think
what's
they're
interesting?
More clever.
Epstein said that in that Bloomberg interview from 20 years ago. Epstein said, he goes, I can't be totally wacko outside of my private properties because it would come back to me and people would think I'm nuts. But he goes, when I'm on my own island or my own ranch, I can explore my own ideas as I see fit. He said something along those lines. And yeah, that makes sense. But
go on. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to say, unfortunately, we're coming up to just over 2 hours, I think, roughly. But if there's anything you wanted to bring up before we you tell us where and how we can find your work and all that.
I'll just say at the end, we didn't properly finish talking about Galbraith, but he's not necessarily the most important part, but he is kind of important because he was the economic link to it, where you had Kissinger with the one. Yeah, it was that economic link was really important to the foundation and principles of the World Economic Forum and what Klaus Schwab was working towards, because the whole American pressure to set up this globalist agenda was done to make sure that the Americans can control European policy and the direction of Europe, and eventually form an Anglo-American super state with Europe attached to it, and eventually dominate the world into a globalist system. We got to realize there's an agenda out there, and it's really hard to understand. You got to do lots of listening, lots of reading, lots of working out yourself, and if you don't, you'll end up being just someone who believes a homogenous group of people who all have an agenda, or another homogenous group of people who all have an agenda, instead of believing the truths that are there and the truths that are there, because both sides will tell you truths, both sides will tell you lies, and you have to do your own research. I'm at Unlimited Hangout. I'm at johnnyvedmore.com. I'm at Fungi Monkey, which is more my media site. It's got some fun stuff on there, and I'm trying to expand. I'm on Twitter. If anybody wants to contact me, they can. And thanks for having me on, as always, guys.
Brother, this was one of the most informative, educational episodes or conversations that I've not only had with you, but I've personally had ever. And also, thank you so much for coming on. And Riel, not sure if you just want to say bye to everybody. And yes, we will catch all of you next time. Thank you so very much, everybody.